At 30,000 feet above the clouds, an ordinary flight bound across the American heartland suddenly turned into a scene no one could have imagined. The passengers on board were calm, some flipping through magazines, some listening to music, some half asleep as the engines hummed a steady rhythm. The captain had just made his routine announcement minutes earlier, reassuring everyone that the skies were clear and the ride smooth. In the cockpit, both pilots were relaxed, discussing weather patterns and arrival times. It was the kind of flight that made people feel safe, almost forgetful of the fact that they were cruising in a massive steel bird so high above the earth. But then, without warning, everything changed. The captain shifted in his seat, suddenly feeling lightheaded. His vision blurred, his speech slurred, and before his co-pilot could register what was happening, his head slumped forward, hands sliding away from the controls. The co-pilot reached out instinctively, alarm flashing in his eyes, but within moments he too gasped for breath, clutched at his chest, and then collapsed. Both pilots were unconscious, their bodies limp as the autopilot continued its steady hold of altitude. At first, the passengers had no idea. They were sipping sodas, reading books, and enjoying the quiet ride. But in row 13, a 12-year-old girl named Emily Carter noticed something different. She had always been observant, curious about machines, fascinated by flight since her earliest childhood. Her father, sitting beside her, was deep into a crossword puzzle, unaware of what was unraveling at the front. Emily leaned toward the aisle, sensing a strange silence after the usual routine chatter from the cockpit ceased. Moments later, a flight attendant rushed past with urgency. Her face was pale, her steps quick, and within minutes whispers spread through the cabin. The pilots were unresponsive. Panic began to ripple. Some passengers clutched armrests, others prayed, some tried to call relatives on their phones, even though service at that altitude was spotty. The idea of two incapacitated pilots in midair at 30,000 feet was almost unthinkable. But it was real, and it left everyone frozen in shock. Everyone, except young Emily. Emily had spent years around airplanes, thanks to her uncle who was a flight instructor. She had flown small Cessna aircraft with him before, sitting in the co-pilot seat, her hands on the yoke while he guided her patiently. To her, cockpits were not alien, they were playgrounds of wonder. While other kids played video games, she studied aircraft diagrams, memorizing gauges, dreaming that one day she would soar as a pilot herself. She never thought that day would come so soon, under such terrifying circumstances. As the flight attendants gathered in confusion, debating what to do, Emily stood up. Her small frame, her youthful face, made her look out of place among anxious adults, but her voice carried unusual firmness. "I can help," she said. At first they dismissed her, thinking it was the naivety of a child under stress. But Emily repeated herself with more confidence. "I've flown before. Please, let me try." The head flight attendant hesitated, torn between disbelief and desperation. The intercom crackled as she tried to contact air traffic control, her voice shaking. "Mayday! Mayday! This is Flight 228. Both pilots are unconscious. We need assistance immediately." Across the radio waves, in a tower hundreds of miles away, controllers sprang into action. Radar screens glowed, alarms rang, and voices tightened with urgency. "Flight 228, Roger. Can anyone on board take the controls?" The words echoed into the cabin, as though fate itself was calling for Emily. Guided by a flight attendant, Emily walked toward the cockpit. The door swung open to reveal the collapsed pilots, slouched in their seats, the smell of electronics and jet fuel filling the small space. For a moment, fear washed over her. She was only 12. The controls looked overwhelming. Lights, switches, gauges glowing like a galaxy of complexity. But then she remembered her uncle's words. Airplanes look scary, but they all speak a language. If you listen, you'll know what they're saying. With trembling hands, she slid into the left seat, the captain's seat. She pulled the headset over her ears, her small voice whispering into the mic. This is Emily. I'm 12 years old. I've flown small planes before. I'll try. In the control tower, silence fell for a second, as seasoned controllers processed what they had just heard. Then one voice came back steady, professional, calm but urgent. Emily, we've got you. Just listen carefully. You're not alone. You can do this. The cabin, once a chamber of panic, now leaned on the courage of a child. Parents hugged their children tighter, strangers clasped hands in prayer, and all eyes turned forward, whispering hope into the heavens. Emily's first task was to confirm the plane's status. Check the autopilot, the controller instructed. She scanned the panel, spotted the button, and confirmed, autopilot engaged. Holding 30,000 feet, relief crackled back through the headset. The plane wasn't spiraling. It was steady, but it needed a human to guide it down. For the next harrowing hour, Emily became the bridge between life and disaster. Controllers guided her step by step, adjusting the heading knob, monitoring fuel gauges, checking altitude. Her childlike hands barely reached all the switches, but she stretched with determination. The passengers sat in awe as the intercom relayed updates. A 12-year-old girl was flying their plane. Some wept, some cheered quietly, but all felt the swell of pride and disbelief that America's spirit of courage was alive in the smallest of heroes. As the jet began its descent, storm clouds rolled in below, tossing turbulence across the wings. Emily gripped the yoke, knuckles white, but her voice stayed steady. "I've got it," she said, echoing words her uncle once taught her. The runway lights of an emergency airfield began to glow through the darkness ahead. Fire trucks lined the pavement, ambulances waited, and the nation held its breath. Controllers talked her through every second. Flaps down, throttle back, keep her steady. The massive jet trembled, wheels lowering, speed reducing, and finally, with a screech of tires and a roar of engines reversing, the plane touched down. The cabin erupted in cries of joy, applause shaking the air, tears flowing freely. Emily had done it. The pilots were rushed to medical care and later diagnosed with sudden oxygen deprivation from a pressurization malfunction, but they survived. The passengers were safe, and Emily Carter became a name etched into American history, a 12-year-old girl who refused to let fear define her, who took the controls at 30,000 feet and brought an entire plane home. Her story spread across the nation. News anchors called her the miracle pilot. Schools taught her courage as an example. She was honored by aviation organizations, invited to air shows, and mentored by real pilots who saw in her the future of American aviation. For millions, Emily became a symbol of what it meant to be American: brave, resourceful, unshaken in the face of the impossible. And though she was just 12 years old, she had proven that heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes, they wear sneakers, carry backpacks, and sit quietly in row 13, until destiny calls them to save the day.